Start recording. Thank you, Evelyn. So good morning, everyone. My name is Eliana Godinho, and I'm with Valley of the Sun United Way. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our capacity building series. This is the third training that we're doing for this series, and it is our last one, unfortunately, but you're all in for a treat. We have logic models and theory of change, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Alex Kurtz, who will be doing the actual training with you all. Can you hear me now? No?
I can hear you, but I don't think Alex can.
Okay. So we're having some technical difficulties, so bear with us because we want to make sure Alex can hear us. Oh, thank you, Jill. So Alex, let me type Alex.
Maybe he can log in and log out and log back in.
Okay.
And I can hear you now too as well.
Oh, can you? Okay, perfect. I was starting to worry. So I'm going to
No worries.
Stop sharing and pass it on to Dr. Kurtz.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Kurtz. I'm a research professor here at ASU. I'm in the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. As a research professor, I apply for federal research awards, broadly confined to the education arena. I've been doing that for 10 years. And in the course of those 10 years, I worked probably on 20 or more different research projects. We were awarded well over $50 million, doing research in various areas from instructional coaching to teacher effectiveness to educational technology. And as part of my work in the grant space, I have to develop logic models and theories of change. And that is our topic today. It's an interactive session, so there will be some work, so to speak, that I require you to do. If you have something like Google Slides or PowerPoint on your laptop, that'd be terrific, because I may ask you to share your screen around that. We also have the Zoom technology called whiteboards available. So if you don't, we can use that space to provide some of that information. So my goal is to introduce you to, and let me share my screen here. I hope you can see that. So my goal is to introduce you to the two types of conceptual frameworks that we frequently use to communicate how our program or strategy works and what the intended outcomes are. After that, we kind of dive into the specifics of a logic model and then a theory of change. Some of you may have experienced individuals using those two names interchangeably. That's not entirely correct. Logic models are slightly different than theories of change. We'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons for each of them. In the end, it is your call to decide how you would like to incorporate that into your program. If you apply for a grant, that may actually be specified. So some granting agencies are requiring a logic model, some are looking for a theory of change. Most of the time you have the option to kind of decide on doing that. But I also would like to communicate today that developing a logic model or theory of change is something you should do for your organization, regardless of whether you are, applying to a grant very soon. And the last part of today's work is really focused on applying what we talked about to your program. So my goal is that you will actually draft a logic model or theory of change and share it with the rest of the group. There is a follow-up session that is more designed to provide you with kind of the one-on-one feedback on your development of the logic model or theory of change. Eliana will provide some details on that follow-up, but what we envision are 30-minute one-on-one blocks that will become available, I think sometime in December. And you just fill up those slots on a first come, first serve basis. All right, well, let's just dive right in. We only have about an hour and a half, and that's going to go by much faster than you think. So That being said, I would love a brief introduction. Just state your name, organization, and then the role within that organization. And yeah, we can just start in terms of order. Either you volunteer or we can just go down the participant list. So the first one that I see here is Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill. I'm with St. Vincent de Paul, and I write their grants across all of their programs. I'm really happy to be here and thankful that you are here to help us learn this.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. Thanks, Jill. Next one I see is Monica on my list.
Monique.
Oh, Monique.
Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies.
Okay. Monique Chicanos por la Causa, Research Development Specialist. I'm part of a team of grant writers. One of my colleagues is here too. I'll let her introduce herself.
Excellent. Glad to have you.
I am. I'm happy to go next. Thank you, Monique. My name is Leah Drumitter. I'm also with Chicanos por la Causa, and I'm also a research development specialist.
Excellent. Well, here in force. I love it. Thank you. Next on my list is Laura.
Hi, sorry. Laura Capello, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Arizona, and I'm the CEO. And I just really wanted to understand, this whole process better. So wanted to jump on the call.
Fantastic. Yeah, glad to have you. Thank you, Laura. Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Gintz. I'm with Boys Hope, Girls Hope of Arizona, and I'm the Director of Monitoring and Support Services here.
Great. Glad to have you. And then I see Vanessa.
Yes, hi, good morning. Sorry, I had trouble logging in, but my name is Vanessa. I'm with Friendly House nonprofit organization, and I am the supervisor of the College and Career Readiness Program.
Excellent. Well, this is great. Wonderful group. If I've forgotten somebody, please let me know before we go on. I think Marielle, did you already go?
No, here I am. Yeah, my name is Mariel Marino. I work for Friendly House. I'm an adult education enrollment specialist. And well, I'm completely new on this topic.
Great. That's perfect. This is an introduction. So this is the right place. I think I've gotten everyone thus far. Like in terms of me, I already gave you my brief introduction. You may also wonder what's the relationship between ASU and United Way. I've actually been working with United Way for well over 5 years. We worked on a project called Thriving Together for quite some time. And then once that sunsetted, I continued my work largely around data analytics and research. And by that, I mean, it's usually action-based research that supports some of the work that United Way is doing. Frequently, we get into the realm of program evaluation, and one of the necessary but not sufficient conditions for program evaluation is actually having a logic model, a theory of change. So it's really a foundational activity you should be doing. And so today, we really kind of tip our toes into that water. The first thing I want to do is a quick activity. It's called an elevator pitch around your program. And I want to mention that today's presentation conveys a lot of information verbally. So if you ask me later on, can you share the slides? I can certainly do that, but a lot of the information is conveyed through the dialogue that we engage in. So just a heads up. And if there is something important to note, I'll let you know so you can make sure that's in your notebook. So the first activity is an elevator pitch. And what I'd like to hear is from each of you is 2 sentences. One sentence is really, what is the goal of your program? And if you have multiple programs, pick the one that you represent or know the most about. And then how does your program achieve said goal? So an example would be that you are a grassroots organization in the homelessness space. You work on filling up emergency beds at a particular shelter, and you do that through direct street outreach. That's how it goes. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about it, and then we'll kind of go through one by one and see if we can accomplish that pitch. So think about it. I'll look at my clock and in about 30 seconds, I'm gonna ask you to pitch it. All right, let's see if we have a volunteer. And I know you may not be used to have to communicate your program's goal and how it accomplishes that goal so succinctly.
I can go if
That'd be
you
fantastic, Leah.
want to
Thank you.
start.
Uh-huh.
So I will add the quick caveat that I have only been with CPLC since June. So I'm picking one program that I am more familiar with. We
Mhm.
have a supportive housing program with a goal of reducing the number of unsheltered homeless in the Phoenix, Arizona community. And our program achieves this goal by securing grant funding to support case managers and housing navigators to place homeless individuals into the appropriate housing units so that they can begin a long-term goal of stability.
Great. That was a perfect pitch. Thank you, Leah.
I can go.
Thank you, Laura.
This is Laura. So we exist to bring out the potential in our youth and to help them realize their potential. And we do that through supported one-on-one mentoring relationships.
Great. Simple. Mhm. Thank you, Laura.
I can go next.
Thanks, Megan.
Boys Hope, Girls Hope of Arizona is a college access program that works to break the generational cycle of poverty through education. So we provide scholarship guidance and holistic programming and support for students starting as early as 6th grade all the way through college graduation. So through that long-term commitment.
Clear. Thank you. And who wants to go next?
We have a lot of programs, so I guess I just had to pick one.
Yeah, Jill.
So prevent the emergencies that lead to homelessness for low-income community members. And we do this by providing holistic support such as rent, utility, case management, and other programs to feed, clothe, house, and heal people.
Great. Very good. Thanks, Jill. Monique?
Okay, I'll have to do like Leah, pick a program because there are so many. We read for all of them. Okay, so CPLC Parenting Arizona is a program I'll describe. Parenting Arizona is a program with the following mission of promoting strong families and improving the lives of children by empowering parents to thrive. They do this by providing home visitation services to families with children of ages 0 to 5. And CPLC Parenting Arizona operates programs in Central Arizona, Northern Arizona, and Southern Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you, Monique. Very good. You guys are doing fantastic. These are all very brief, succinct pitches, very clear. Vanessa, I don't think I've had a chance to hear yours yet.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm with the College and Career Readiness Program. Our goal is to provide students with resources and services to successfully graduate high school and then enroll into a post-secondary education. We do this by providing mentorship and guidance to our students to successfully meet that goal.
Okay, excellent. Great. And then I think, Christine, have we heard yours yet? And then we need to use and the time also to introduce Claudia.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I don't think I was introduced, so I
Oh,
will
please
say,
go ahead.
it's
My
okay.
bad.
I'm Kristen Gappa with Arizona Kids Think Too. I'm the executive director, and we are a local nonprofit organization providing academic tutoring and mentoring and after-school enrichment programming to students and schools in need with a goal of improving students' academic success.
Fantastic. Okay, great to have you. And then Claudia, I think you joined us also. If you would like to just briefly introduce yourself, your organization, your role, and then give us your 2-sentence pitch on what your program is, the goal, and how you accomplish it.
Okay, sorry, I came a little late. I was having issues getting into the meeting, but my name is Claudia Espinosa, and I am a family services supervisor for a nonprofit Friendly House. So I'm very much acquainted with Vanessa and her program. So there's different programs that I am involved with. So we do have the Arizona Department of Health Services grants that lets us provide youth the sexual education services. And then we have for youth and adults for preventative services. For example, like we teach them about vaping, and we teach them about the opioid epidemic, and that is our goal, is to service and let them know that information that is very important. So sexual education and preventative.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Claudia.
Can go next.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, so the adult education department of Friendly House gave access to quality educational opportunities to support employment, job training, and higher education aspirations. We assist adult learners to acquire the knowledge and skills necessary for effective participation in society. Our main programs are GED and English as a second language.
Great. Wonderful. All of you are doing great work, and I appreciate how succinctly you were communicating your program's goal. Great. I think we got everybody covered thus far. So looking at the goals you stated, it's very typical that we get a broad spectrum of these types of goals, some of which are what I would consider global goals that are further out in terms of its success, meaning it's a long-term goal. It takes some time to achieve that goal. And it can be global. That is, the academic success, for example, of a student can encompass many things. So the way we call an operational definition and operation define it has a more longitudinal range. Some of you were very discreet. You talked about what I would consider more short-term goals. They are skill-based. You teach a particular piece of knowledge or skill to the participants in the program. And ultimately, they may trickle down to what we call a long-term global goal. And that's exactly what logic models and theories of change intend to do. There are ways of communicating to your stakeholders, whether that's participants, funders, external members, as well as internally to your team. What are the active ingredients of your program? You already mentioned some of those levers by which you achieve those goals. And it partitions out desired outcomes into things that are achieved proximally, or what I call short-term, as well as long-term or distal. So that's the number one thing I think we want to remember, that these types of conceptual frameworks, while they seem rather theoretical, actually have a very practical purpose. They're communication tools, both internally and externally. They delineate both of those types of frameworks, delineate key elements of your program and their relationship to certain outcomes. There are some differences between logic models and theories of change on that notion. So theories of change have a much clearer through line to this active ingredients leads to this outcome, as opposed to a logic model, which just makes more broader statements and doesn't tease out certain parts of your program and its relation to an outcome. As I mentioned earlier, those conceptual frameworks are a necessary but not sufficient condition for a program evaluation. I'll actually explain you the steps, how you move from a theory of change or logic model to a program evaluation. There are several iterative steps, but you always begin with a logic model or theory of change. And of course, I think we're all aware of the fact that those types of models, whether it's a logic model or theory of change, are required by most funding agencies. All right, I assume if there are any questions, please just unmute and jump right in. If not, we'll start looking at the first elements. Okay, so this is a logic model. I gave you an example here on screen. There are, if you take a look at it, 6 key elements: inputs, activities, outputs, and then a list of outcomes. You, as the developer of the logic model, can decide whether you want to have only short-term and long-term outcomes or kind of add that intermediate step. Typically, you do have at least 2 elements. So you don't just end up with long-term outcomes or short-term outcomes. You at least have 2 elements. And there is a logical connection between those elements. That is, short-term outcomes are the most proximal to your program, and they are under the greatest amount of your control. The further you go out, such as a distal outcome, the more additional factors come into play. So if we take academic success, for example, there are lots of factors that contribute to academic success, not just your program. Clearly, what's happening in the school during the school day in terms of instruction, parental involvement, there could be additional tutoring happening in certain key areas. All of those factors come together to ensure academic success. So positing goals at that level is very much possible as a long-term goal, but we want to use theories of change or logic models to kind of delineate the things that we believe we control the most through our program that then lead up to a long-term goal. And I'll show more examples around that to kind of illustrate that concept. So let's begin with inputs in a logic model. So if you decide to use a logic model for your particular agency, the first thing you want to look at are the inputs related to the program. So typically that means listing the participants that are involved in your intervention or strategy. So in this case, we have families, staff, etc. You may also have certain key materials, access to technology that is necessary. One of the programs we worked with within United Way for quite some time was called Velo. It was a one-on-one virtual tutoring program in the reading space. That tool required not just teachers and students to participate as well as volunteers. It also required a technology piece. So that all needs to be listed under your inputs. Then under the activity stage, you will delineate with brief sentences or bullets what the key activities are that those participants of your program engage in. So in the example of the tutoring program, the volunteers would meet with students for 30-minute sessions and they would read together. So it was basically a guided reading session. That was the activity. In some cases, your program has multiple activities that are relevant to be listed here. One thing that I want to point out is that input is just one block, so is activities, and so are all the other remaining elements. What that means is you don't draw a direct connection between, let's say in this example, what do families do over on the activity side? So especially if you list multiple inputs and multiple activities, the reader has to decide how these interact. That's one of the benefits of a theory of change, where you can actually draw arrows and boxes in a way to delineate and communicate that. Now, you may wonder, well, why would I then use something that kind of just gives me a block of activities and then a block of outputs without clearly saying this activity leads to that outcome? Well, that's because in some cases, it's actually very difficult to empirically verify which part of your intervention contributes to a certain outcome. So if a tutor works with a child on a guided reading exercise, they may engage with the text, ask questions, work on vocabulary, talk about some definitions. There might be help around pronunciation. So there's phonemic awareness and phonics coming into play. Understanding which part of those activities leads to an increase in reading fluency might be rather difficult. We might say, well, it's the holistic engagement in all of those activities that leads to an increase in reading fluency. So we don't know and don't care to know which part of what we call a packaged intervention contributes to a certain outcome. From having done hundreds of these types of conceptual frameworks, I can tell you most of the time we start with a package deal, right? There are several key ingredients of your program. There are several key activities, and you just believe that collectively they lead to a certain outcome. The third element in the logic model is outputs. This is probably the key differentiator between a logic model and a theory of change. Only logic models define outputs. Outputs are different from outcomes. Outputs are necessary to achieve the outcomes that you list on the right, but they are your typical service metrics. How many people go through your program? How many people complete a professional development workshop? Those are the types of outputs you provide. It could be materials, tasks that are leading to certain outcomes, but they're definitely a simple output metric. And many times those metrics aren't necessarily specific to the participants, like if materials get provided to participants, if certain activities are completed, a certain number of sessions, etc. So I'm going to pause right here. Are the first three elements relatively clear? Any questions? Okay, great. And then we move into the outcome stage. In this case, you see it stays one big block of text. Let's take a look at the short-term example here. Increase parental knowledge of the nature of their child's disability. Okay, so first thing to note is that they begin with a verb, increase. That's a really good strategy because you want to communicate a key aspect in terms of the outcome, but you want to indicate a direction. Many of you did that in the pitch. You were talking about decreasing something or increasing something. That's really important, especially if we move later on into the program evaluation stage, would require us to take each of the outcomes we mentioned and develop measures and metrics for each outcome, and subsequently a data collection plan and a program evaluation plan. And so indicating direction of what you're doing in terms of your outcomes is critical. You'll see that throughout the examples I provide. And then the medium stage here in this example is increased parental ability to help their child succeed. So the assumption is that if you first know more about the nature of your child's disabilities, you are then better prepared to support your child in the special education system in school. So there's a logical flow from the proximal short-term outcome to the intermediate medium step. And then lastly, the long-term outcome is parents and educators collaborate to provide improved services to children with disabilities. But that's a more general statement. And again, there are lots of variables that kind of contribute to parents and educators' ability to improve services for kids with disabilities more broadly, which is why that is posited at the end. Sometimes I call these global goals. All right, so these are the 6 key elements that we typically see in a logic model. And once again, the most important differentiator here is that logic models introduce outputs. All right, let's take a look at a theory of change. First thing you notice is that things are less text-based and more visual in terms of there's a bunch of boxes and arrows. I personally like theories of change because they're much easier to consume. So if you look at the primary goal in terms of communicating to stakeholders of what you do and what you intend to achieve, I find theories of change quicker to consume, right? You don't have blocks of text and you see clear delineations. So if we just look at this visually, we see 5 key elements. Talks about participants, then you say something about your program, and then we see the usual suspects in terms of proximal, intermediate, and distal outcomes. All right, what's the next thing you notice? Can you take a look at the outcomes, and I want you to look at the sheer number and look across proximal to distance. What is it that you notice?
I think it's interesting, whether this is what you're going for or not, that each of the different outcomes is broken down by who we expect to see the outcome from, or who we expect to be experiencing the outcome, so that it breaks it down into those sections more clearly.
Yeah, that's a great observation. That's another key differentiator, Leah, is around who the outcome is addressing. So in this case, we have our tutoring intervention, which of course has primary benefits for the students, right? We want to help students improve their reading. And so it makes sense that you see a lot of red dots with an S. And then of course, there are other benefits for teachers, volunteers, and parents. Yep, that's great. Good observation. Perhaps another observation.
I feel like it kind of tells a story
And how
more so than a logic model.
okay.
Just
And
moving
how-
from left to right and the way the brain reads this.
I agree. I find it easier to navigate for sure. And Jill, if you look at the number of proximal outcomes and you compare to the distal outcomes, how does that contribute to sort of like telling a story?
Well, the outcomes, it's funny because there's so many proximal outcomes, fewer intermediate, and then like all the outcomes are really the same, right? Like the end goal is really the same. You just get there in different ways with perhaps different participants.
That's exactly it. Yes, you see sort of this funnel, and
Yeah.
it's a logical build. We, of course, control very discrete things we do at the proximal level, like improved reading skills, improved reading level, reading engagement in school, at home, and then we increase the volunteer. All of that supposed to lead to intermediate step and distal step. And that kind of trickle down effect over time means that it takes a lot more discrete individual outcomes at the proximal level to lead to larger change at the immediate and then the distal level. So when you develop a theory of change, you should see that funnel in this direction. If you come from a few proximal outcomes to a whole list of global goals at a distal level, something's not quite right. Because we know that if I work with, if I want to improve reading comprehension, if you know anything about reading, there's like these big 5 that we've talked about a lot in research around phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, etc. All of those things come into play to improve your reading comprehension. You need to be able to read fluently, accurately. You have to have a lot of vocabulary knowledge in order to comprehend. And so if you posit that as a global goal, you would have several little ones up front that then lead to an increase in reading comprehension. And so when you structure your theory of change, I want you to make sure that you kind of get that funnel where you have quite a few proximal outcomes that then trickle down to a smaller set of distal outcomes. All right, let's take a look at the elements. First one is rather simple, participants. Just list everybody involved in the actual program that is related to the outcomes. And I think that's important. So if you appear on the participant list, we should have an outcome for you on either the proximal, intermediate, or distal level. You see that here clearly delineated in the corner. We have those 4 bubbles for each of the participants, and indeed, all of them are popping up somewhere on our outcomes list. So this is a little bit different because in the logic model, we were a lot more comprehensive. I mentioned earlier, anybody involved in your program. So that may mean you have a trainer that works with parents, or a specialist that works with another agency. It is by virtue of that person that certain things get accomplished, but they are not the target of your program. There are no benefits that the program was designed for to yield for this particular person. So your trainers aren't part of maybe the academic success goal you set for your program. So we wouldn't include them here in the participant list. So the theory of change only includes participants for which you also want to measure and posit some outcomes. So then the participant moves into the second part, that is your program. So when you, and by the way, I really recommend something like PowerPoint to develop this setup here, because in PowerPoint, you can very easily draw boxes, make the arrows, and yeah, another program is Keynote, I mean, if you have an Apple, and then if you have neither of those programs, you can even use Google Slides. And by the way, I frequently get the complaint that these programs are space limited. Whether you use even the wide setup for a slide deck, you don't have a lot of space. And I always say that's actually a blessing. Logic models can get, if you've seen some in grant applications, can get very bloated. I've seen lots and lots of logic models that contain a full page of text. And it becomes very difficult to use that as a communication tool, whether I'm a reviewer on a grant or whether I'm just a stakeholder that's curious around, well, how do you achieve what you plan on achieving? And so if your desire is to communicate accurately and efficiently, I do think the theory of change provides that benefit of being a lot more succinct. And yes, that means you only have that page to be able to communicate. And I feel it's like it forces you to be succinct. So in terms of the program, I want you to list the key active ingredients of your program. And in a little bit, we'll actually try that exercise. You can play in PowerPoint or you can play in Google Slides to kind of draw that up, at least initially today. And then when we have our follow-up session, I'll really do a deep dive with you one-on-one on what you've developed thus far. So key ingredients could be multiple ones. You can delineate them as right here, as, let me get the markup tools so I can draw right here. Okay, that's where we are. And you can see that there is a larger box around it. This larger box denotes that you don't think that you can parse out RAS Plus, which is the Learning A to C. It's a technology platform. So in order for this tutoring program to work, you need this technology platform to select books to read. And then of course, you have your volunteer that reads with the child for 30 minutes. But it doesn't work without the technology platform. So those two things are absolutely essential. You don't believe that you can parse out engagement only with the platform and engagement only with the tutor. So what you do is you create a package, and that's exactly it. You have this box here, and you say there are two active ingredients inside: the technology and the tutoring. We did another example in the homelessness space. Let me pull that up. And if you have a question while I'm looking up that example, please unmute. Okay, so this example I'm about to show is on homelessness. And actually, I think there's quite a few agencies here that do work in that space. All right. This theory of change here was developed with United Way. And when we talked about what's your program in the homelessness space, the team here at VSUW said, well, there's actually a lot going on. It's very difficult to communicate just one program. We do a lot of things. There are a lot of services being provided. And so as we brainstormed all of this, and by the way, this can, if you have a large organization, that may involve a separate session where people take sticky notes and post them on the wall so you can get a good, quick brainstorm on all the activities you do, and then you consolidate. And that's actually what we did here. We ended up consolidating the program sections into 3 areas. Some of the work done in the homelessness arena was focused on prevention, financial assistance, there was Project Connect. Then we had a bunch of intervention services from street outreach to case management to bridge housing, and then all the way to stability services related to permanent supporting housing, the Seymour Institute, etc. And then what you see here, and that's important, you can see that outcomes have a clear through line. So these 3 active ingredients lead to very distinct and separate outcomes, right? So prevention services has its own set of outcomes. Intervention services has its own set of outcomes, as well as stability. And then of course, they have proximal ones, then intermediate ones, and then finally, all 3 of them contribute to 4 major global outcomes at the distal end. Decrease per capita homeless population, decrease the number of chronically homeless individuals, increase total household income for those participants, and decrease student mobility. So there's a lot going into this coming from 3 distinct areas. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, great. And I'll go back to our main one. All right, so once again, here it's a lot simpler, right? We're not parsing anything out about the program. The program itself leads to a set of 5 proximal outcomes. They're all distinctly listed. We have we work on improved reading skills, increase in reading level. Let me just check. Thank you. Increased reading engagement in school, increased reading engagement at home, and then increased volunteer engagement. So the group with whom I work with believe that those are the outcomes they can most directly affect. If we would be going back to a logic model, an input would be simply stating the number of, let's say, required tutoring session. Maybe you will say to participating schools, a graduate of the Velo tutoring program is someone that has completed 10 sessions, and they're all 30 minutes long. That's okay, Laura, no worry. And so that would be an output that you have coming from the program. That in and of itself doesn't guarantee any of the proximal outcomes, but it clarifies a certain threshold or requirement. We don't have that here in the theory of change. Now, if you are improving your reading, you're actually moving up in reading levels because you're moving through a lot of books with your tutor. What that should lead to is a general improvement in reading engagement. And then ultimately what that means is you increase your independent reading. So even without the tutor prompting you, you start picking a book on your own because you feel more confident as a reader and you enjoy it more. And so you kind of get these distal outcomes. The other piece that was introduced here is increased growth mindset at the distal end. And so the assumption baked into this is that the tutor actually, just by reinforcing you, giving you a lot of positive praise for completing the books, you learn that even though you struggle in reading, you can, with a lot of effort, you can work through it and you can get better. So it's not a matter of ability, it's a matter of hard work that eventually gets you there. And again, we see that funnel, we see 5 proximal outcomes that in the end lead to 2 distal outcomes. All right. I'm going to show you another example because I think some of the comments indicated it's good to see different examples. So the next one I'll bring up is a TOC developed for the Teachers College here at Arizona State. And this is our program for teacher preparation. So let me just show you a quick one on that. Okay, theory of change. And you can tell this was done by me because I have certain, a certain style, but regardless of that, you should still see some of the key elements we've talked about. Participants, right? There's the faculty, our students, the mentor educators in the K-12 schools, and so on and so forth. Then we see the program. It looks like there are 3 key elements. There is our courses through the certification program. There's a residency model, which you probably heard under the term student teaching. And then there's induction model for those who come in from already being in the field. There are 2 main areas for the proximal outcomes. They're separated. So you kind of see now a variation, right? You've seen the one that was very distinct from the homelessness space. Velo was kind of more of a package deal. And here we sort of see the intermediate step where we have two areas, one up here. And that's really, you can tell, it's all about mastery of certain performance learning objectives in the area of design and decision-making, professional growth, and then our Educator Scholar series. And down here, we have another set around opportunity and efficacy for certain initiatives that are emphasized by the Teachers College. And then again, they lead to certain intermediate outcome, and then they go through certain distal outcomes. Now, one thing you might notice is that you don't get a very clear funnel, right? This one starts out with 7 proximal outcomes, and we end up with 7 distal outcomes. Not necessarily ideal. However, we don't get the one thing that we want to avoid, which is the opposite funnel. A few proximal outcomes leading to a whole range of distal outcome. It's just logically a lot less convincing, right? Because you need a lot more discrete skills in order to promote global changes. It's not just one little thing that leads to 3 major global changes. Usually you need many, many more smaller changes to lead to one big change down the road. Right. The other thing I want you to observe is if you look at the discrete elements in here, it always talks about improved something, increased something. So using that verb strategically about what you're trying to do. I heard some of you are decreasing certain things. That's very possible. I don't have a horse in the race whether you should state only positive statements. So can you flip your decrease into something positive? I think it's fine to have some decreases here. We have a theory of change on a bias measure. So of course, there you see a lot of, we want to decrease bias on things. And I think that's totally acceptable. All right. So before we get into our next activity where you kind of try your hand at that and we kind of work as a group around doing that, I want to point to the through line towards program evaluation. Ideally, for each of those outcomes, you have a measure in place that can collect information on this, and you already know about a metric that you will get out of this. By metric, I mean you might get a % correct, you might get a score, maybe just a frequency count. Those are the metrics, but they're really tied to a certain measure. And that will inform your measurement plan. So what I do is, once we have established all the outcomes, if I consult with somebody, I will then ask, okay, so what are the measures you already have, maybe developed or purchased, that gives you an answer, a quantitative answer on those outcomes? So in this case, for example, improved reading skills. There was nothing in place. So I had to go in and develop that particular measure. You can do that. There will be probably a follow-up series on proper survey developments. So how do we develop constructs? How do we sample that construct through specific items? What can we do simply to measure the reliability of a survey through, let's say, an alpha? Those are very basic steps, but they should be adhered to if you want to have a reliable measure. Because if you do your own homegrown survey, there are a lot of pitfalls you can fall into, such as survey items that ask, how satisfied were you with the program? And using that as sort of like a key outcome metric. But again, unfortunately, that's a much bigger topic. But suffice to say, for each of the outcomes, you should have a measure in mind or have a plan to develop a measure to get at that. So you can imagine in terms of reading skills, that construct was parsed out into the big five. So I developed items related to fluency, items related to phonics, phonemic awareness, and it was asking specifically, to what extent do you think Velo has helped you improve X, whether that's reading fluency, certain aspect of phonemic awareness, etc. And it was very concrete, operationally defined. And so we had ended up sort of with, I think, about a 30-item test that would tap into all of those different areas. All right. So just keep that in mind, that you should have an empirical measure that can give you an answer to these outcomes. If you start completely from scratch on these outcomes, many times what I do as an independent consultant is I look at your website, I look at your promotional materials, and then we have a work session. And putting all those inputs together, I can already begin the conversation with a list of goals that I've gathered through some of the stuff that you put out there. I can tell you from experience that most of the time when I do this, I end up with a very, very long list. It's not surprising to have 20 plus outcomes listed between your brochures, between your websites. They're not all perfectly aligned. And most of the time, they're very, very global, right? You kind of state the big things that you want to achieve in the end up front, but usually you don't pay a lot of attention to the little steps that are actually supposed to lead to those outcomes. And when you launch a program evaluation, one of the common mistakes I see out in the field is that you hinge your bets on those big global outcomes, ignoring data collection on the proximal intermediate ones. And then what happens is, if we don't see the big global changes that you were hoping to achieve with your program, we get really disappointed. But it's a dead end. We can't move forward because we weren't understanding to what extent did we actually get the proximal outcomes into place that then are supposed to lead to the more distal global outcomes. And so it is a key strategy, because most of my program evaluations are very successful at the proximal level, right? Because these are the things we really tightly control. So make those low-hanging fruits, make those things you're pretty confident you can accomplish. And then as you move to the intermediate level, you can introduce things that are not entirely under your control. And then all the way at the end, you posit the distal outcomes. They take more time and they take more inputs to be able to achieve. All right. Well, it is time to try our hand at drafting something based on the elevator pitch you gave me earlier. So you already picked a program and you were able to pretty succinctly communicate, here's a key goal that we're trying to accomplish, and here's some things of how we get there. I noticed that some of you actually already implicated some proximal outcomes in how you get there to the global goal. And that's usually what happens, right? Is we realize, oh, this little intermediate step actually could be an outcome we can posit on our theory of change. Now, I don't want to box you in on a theory of change. You can tell I'm a little biased towards them, but if you're willing to, be open, then I encourage you to try both. But for right now, what I would love for you to do is, if you are moving towards a grant writing process, use internal communication, or just simply want to help your team better understand what you're doing and how you do it, this is a good activity. So we have two options. We can use Whiteboard within Zoom, or we can allow you to take about 10 minutes to play around in your PowerPoint on your desktop or your Google Slides to put a few things together. So I'd just like for you to quickly unmute and tell me what you feel comfortable with, if we should do it in breakout rooms on the whiteboards within Zoom, or if you just want to play around in PowerPoint or Google Slides. It doesn't have to look pretty. It's more about communicating the ideas. Would PowerPoint or Google Slides be okay? Can you independently start drafting either a theory of change or a logic model? Okay, Christina, no problem.
Personally, I can do it either way.
Excellent.
So
My preference
whatever you
would
need.
be that you pop up your PowerPoint, and we'll take about 10 minutes to see what we can put together. It doesn't have to be finished, but I want you to start thinking about it, and then us kind of get peer feedback on where we are with our drafts.
Okay.
So if that works for Jill and Monique, Megan, Claudia, Vanessa, if you want to open up your PowerPoint.
Okay. This is Monique. I'm going to try this, but I also need to let you know that sometimes when I have too many things going on while I'm on a webinar, that everything starts to work real slow.
Okay. No problem.
But I'll bring up PowerPoint and I'll try.
Mm-hmm.
So do you just want us to start putting our ideas down on these slides and then share later, or what exactly are you looking for?
That's right. That's exactly it, right, Monique. If you can put your and let me go back to this. If you want to try your hand at, say, a theory of change, you can kind of try to draft that out. Give a box with your participants, maybe list your key ingredients of your program, and then try your hand at writing the proximal outcomes and the distal. And I can leave the theory of change up if you want to see that as sort of an exemplar. I'd still love to bring it back for the last sort of 15 minutes to kind of do a share out of where the drafts have landed, learn a little bit more about the challenges you ran into, so we can kind of work together as a group to resolve some of those. And then once again, there is a whole follow-up where you can get more tailored, customized feedback in a kind of private session. All right, let's take a look. I'm gonna stop sharing. And then I believe, Eliana or Evelyn, is it possible for anybody to sort of like get control and share their PowerPoint or Google slide?
Yes, I think anyone can go ahead and if you just select the share screen, they should have the availability to do so.
Fantastic. All right, who wants to volunteer, go first? That also means you're the first to get feedback.
I don't see where to share screen, so I'm not sure it is available or.
It should be on the bottom. Let me see. Evelyn, they should be able to share, correct?
I can take a screenshot and put it in chat.
Yeah, we can improvise. If you don't see the screen share on the bottom, let me. Yeah, we can. Yeah, I'm trying to see, but I think since Evelyn signed in, Evelyn, I don't know if you're available to check. Maybe she was pulled away. So yes, Jill, if you can screenshot it and then share it in the chat box, I'll go ahead and text Evelyn, see if she's available to figure it out for us.
Oh, you know, it's not working, so I might have to turn it into a file and upload it.
Alex, do you see the screen share or?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I just, if I wiggle
Well,
them
you
out.
were sharing, right? I think, and Megan, were you gonna say something?
Yeah,
saw
I can see it on mine.
you- Okay,
Oh, okay.
It's just on the bottom. It's like participants chat, share
Oh,
screen.
yeah,
did you find it, Joe?
I sure did.
Yay,
Great.
Do you see it?
not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, I have to click share. Hello. It has a box around it, but yeah.
There we go, yay.
Fantastic.
Get bigger. So essentially, I'm trying to do our resource center, which actually has multiple functions, kind of like your homelessness model, but I kept it at just the financial assistance piece, where
Mhm.
we help people with rent, utilities, and things of that nature so that they avoid a crisis that may lead them into homelessness. So it's prevention. I feel like I was dismal at like
No, this is a great start.
the proximal outcomes. It's like funny, I couldn't think of this. I don't know. I have no comment here.
Okay, so we have avoid homelessness, remain housed. So you offer us an option for actually
Yeah.
flipping what we're looking at in terms of are we avoiding a negative outcome or maintaining a positive outcome or achieving one?
You know what's funny about that is I find that there was a gal on here who said she just started in June, and I feel like it's almost easier because when you're in knee deep, you're used to the colloquialisms, and you know, like homelessness is kind of just a hotbed of, you know, feelings and things of that nature. So I found myself having trouble to get rid of it in order to maintain a positive remain housed.
Yep. And when let's just take that one for a second. So first off, are you thinking that eventually there will be certain like if you look at the financial assistant part of your program, will that lead to very distinct proximal outcomes? Or do you think that somebody that comes to you actually will probably engage in all three? They get case management, they get some financial assistance and legal aid. So it's a package.
Well, I think that's really up to how they present and what their needs are. So I think the more needs you have, the more barriers you need to overcome for your family. then, potentially the case management comes into play, because certainly we don't have case management on a 1-to-1 ratio. We don't have that kind of
Okay.
staff level. So I think it just really is like, what's going to get people to long-term stability and increase quality of life, but particularly long-term stability. So it's not always going to be, a lot of people just need help with a partial month's rent, like literally $300 or $500 is what they cannot come up with. And so people who are in the bucket of, relative stability, but really need help because they're paycheck to paycheck, that is a lot of the people we help.
Great. And so
So
hearing
they wouldn't
that,
need case management or legal aid, I
Yeah.
guess is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, and hearing that, Jill, I would say that, your program is more of a package, right? Depending on your need, you may tap into all three or just one or two
Yeah.
of those. And so given the fact that the participants on the left kind of choose their own adventure, we would make that a package. So that means if we have a package program, we probably won't delineate separate outcomes. We'll just state them here on the left, also as a package, very dissimilar to what you saw with the reading tutoring program. Then in terms of the verbiage, I would try to avoid things like avoid. So we really want to look at things that have directionality. Even remain is tricky from a measurement perspective, because remember, we are ultimately looking at a through line towards program evaluation and continuous improvement. So we'd have to get a little creative around remain housed. So what I would suggest is let's reflect on that and think about if you get 100 people coming through the door, do we want to increase the number of individuals who remain housed, right?
Right. Yes. So
And
increase.
So we actually want to increase that, because not everyone that walks through your door achieves that goal, right? We can't guarantee that outcome. Maybe 60 out of the 100 that walk through your door can be retained in their current housing situation. And so our goal here is to increase the number of individuals who can remain housed in their current placement. Great. Excellent. And it is up to you if you actually want to put the metric in there right away. You can just leave it as increased individuals who remain housed in your back pocket. However,
Yeah.
we will actually use a frequency count. I would say most definitely that's going to end up actually being a percentage if you just want to focus on the number of folks coming through your door. Then the
Got
next
it.
one is secure immediate crisis. Did
Yeah,
you
I mean,
need-
that's how we keep them housed, right? Like we help their deficiency, whatever it is in the moment. I mean, some people literally just need a car repair or something of that nature. So they can keep getting to work, so they can keep paying their rent.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So what I'm thinking
Yeah.
is that we are either decreasing the acute crises that individuals are experiencing, or we're
Yeah.
increasing.
I see what you're saying.
We're increasing the protective things we're doing related to these crises. I'm not expressing that really eloquently, but if I come
But I
in with
get
3
where you're-
issues, don't have a car, about to have my utilities shut off, and there's some ongoing repairs in my apartment, and we'll help you with all 3 of them, then
I think it's like increased stability or increased personal security or something of that
that's
nature.
right. Yeah, I like that. Increase personal stability. Yep. Security. Perfect. Excellent. And keep in mind that, yes, there is this whole thing in the back of our mind about how do we operationally define that What does that mean? Personal stability. We do that subsequently, right? I mean, if you looked at some of the examples I gave you, we had to still unpack them, knowing that you are improving reading ability. It wasn't unpacked yet, right? There needs to be an operational definition. What does that mean? And so we're fine with this level. So this is great. Increased individuals remain housed, increased personal stability, security. Excellent. And then we kind of move into the intermediate distal one.
Yeah, I don't know. Feeling like a failure here.
Jill, no, not at all. This is a fantastic start. And keep in mind that usually when we work on theories of change and logic modeling, this could be a semester-long course.
Yeah,
We're really just kind of doing a crash course. Like if you feel like just being thrown into something that feels a little vague, that's because we only had 90 minutes to do tackle a pretty large topic. All right.
Oh,
So let's,
mostly it makes a ton of sense. I literally love it. I just think I will overthink this to the nth degree, so I can spend hours on it.
yeah, I hear you, which is why usually we kind of facilitate that process. So when I work with individuals, I'm the facilitator and you bring all the knowledge you have in your head, and then we'll work it through together. All right, let me just take a quick look at the intermediate. Ensure people find us in advance of emergency. Okay. Understand other needs and barriers, provide case management to come other barriers. Okay.
Yeah, that would be like the case management.
And I love the distal outcomes, long-term stability, right? And then increased quality of life. Yep, those make good sense to me. And again, we would then have to operationalize what does quality of life mean. So if we do a longitudinal survey follow-up with previous clients, I don't know what the term would be, Jill, but then that's what we would tackle. You know, I would say, what are the key constructs of quality of life? There might be 3 or 4 things we want to address. I'll write several items to each key construct, and then that survey goes out after maybe a year, and then we kind of gather that information. Now,
whoa, yes.
the intermediate level is not quite there for me yet. So we would have to, I would say, let's, and by the way, if we would do that in a facilitated session, we wouldn't even force you up front into trying to differentiate proximal from intermediate. I think distal, most of us can kind of know, okay, that's a global goal, but we would just put them on Post-it notes, and then we would kind of group them into like items. And then we kind of work on leading up. Are there any skills that you need to accomplish to get to that? Or is this getting to that? So sometimes 2 Post-it notes lead to another one over here. Other times we realize, oh, there is a step prior to this. So we write a new Post-it note. And I think in your case, we would probably work on a few more proximal outcomes and then take those to think about, so how does that logically lead up to a intermediate step, a more broader goal that kind of encompasses holistically some of the things we are achieving at the proximal end.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
And so what I would suggest is, you know, you kind of tinker with this a little bit, and then when we meet back up in December, and again, those are one-on-one sessions, right? That's where you and I will just work for 30 to 45 minutes just on what you've done without, you know, sharing your space and time with others. So this is a great start, Jill. Thank you for, you know, being the first one up. And then do we have an example for one more? I know we're running short on time, but I really want to see if somebody else would want to share theirs.
I can share mine.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it.
So caveat is I'm not like brand new to, are you seeing it? I'm not brand new to logic modeling. So I had some language already, but I think one area that I was struggling with a little bit is just like kind of making things more succinct, like into smaller, you know, more just like increase or this, you know, just because there are like we have so many programs, and since we're, you know, really like an 11-year program, it's super long term. And so, yeah.
This is great. Yeah, I can tell you've been trying your hand at this before. This is great. So you have a comprehensive set of programs related to support, personal development, empowerment.
And so one thing, so for the support, I didn't know how specific I should get either, because, it's like scholars come to our program X number of days a week and do X number of things. If it's better to break it down more, like the support more into more specifics, but then I worry that it's, there's 100 programs.
Yeah, no, we don't want to get into the weeds. Theories of change, as we said earlier, are communication tools, and we want to stay at a more 10,000-foot level, knowing that there are things to be operationalized down the road if we go into the measurement program evaluation space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the level of detail is very good. College career readiness. Now, for your program, which is highly complex, if this would be a facilitated session, we would really have to consider what I call process mapping, and that is you kind of guide me through if I'm a student starting as early as 6th grade, like what is my experience sort of start to finish, and in kind of mapping that flow out from the vantage point of a student will then help us understand how to map this more clearly. So that usually happens when we have complex programs, because I can imagine that sometimes it is somebody parachutes in along that flow, right? You don't necessarily all your participants start in 6th grade. Some of them are probably in high school or maybe even post-secondary. So mapping that flow would be a prerequisite step to do a clear job at mapping those. Now, for right now, I think it's a great start. There's a whole bunch of key elements. If we, again, have that similar, no problem, Claudia, the situation where people jump in and out at different points and use different components of your overall program, it becomes a package, right? So we would draw a bigger dashed line around those 6 key elements, arguing that, well, it's a big component package and you kind of select what you need. Remove financial barriers, increase engagement, okay, increase ability to apply around skills. Those are all very good. And again, they lead us to then the next step. How do we operationalize that? How do we measure it? What's the measure? What's the metric? Intermediate outcomes, target college prep. Yep. And then here, let's take the example on the intermediate level. Increase skills to help scholars identify a career path and to be successful in the workplace. Be careful about using a double barrel, right? Where there's 2 things involved here. Placement in a workplace might be a separate thing from identifying a career path. In fact, you could argue that first you have to identify a career path. As a next level outcome, maybe identifying the career path is a proximal outcome of being in the program. And then subsequently, we have placement in a workplace that is aligned to that career path. And then maybe longitudinally, we want you to be there for a certain amount of time, like persistence in that workplace shows. And that's kind of what happens as we dig in. We take one and then realize there might be a step prior or there might be a step after, and we kind of start adding things as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Becky. All right, so my hope is, and I know some people had to jump off, really appreciate your time and willingness to kind of share. I really hope to see some of you again in the December session. I know Eliana is going to say something about that in a second. Once again, thank you, and it will allow me to kind of work with you more on a one-on-one basis if you are interested in fleshing this out some more.
Thank you, Alex. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today and sticking around till the end. We will send out a follow-up email with the link so that you can sign up if you're interested and get working more and one-on-one with Alex and receiving more of that individual feedback based on what you've been working on. And if I know you didn't have a lot of time today, so you can spend a little bit more time based on some of the feedback you've heard already, and time for the meetings that will be coming up in December. So this was recorded. We will share with the group the recording. We know some folks had to jump off early, but we hope that this was helpful, and we'll follow up with that email. And thank you again for being vulnerable and sharing, and your openness and willingness to share and receive some of that feedback. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday, guys.
you.
Hope to see you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Jill. Bye, Monique.
Bye.